Hi, this is Mark Arnold at Fun Ideas Podcast, and today we have a special guest from the Cars, Greg Hawkes, and also with us is Charles Rosenay, who has brought Greg to us today. How is everybody?
Hi,
Great.
good, thanks. This is Greg, thanks. Nice to be here.
Good to meet you too. We brought you on here to talk about the Turtles of all things, but at the same time, we're going to talk about your career and different things that you've done. I have a few questions, so we'll just start off the way I usually start off is tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in music.
Let's see, I got interested in music really directly from hearing the Beatles in 1964 when I was 11 years old at the time. And it was like when I first heard "I Want to Hold Your Hand" on the radio. It was like, the light bulb moment, and it's like it was a life-changing event.
And were you already interested in music prior to that? Like, you play everything, which we'll kind of go into, every type of instrument.
Yeah. I mean, I had taken piano lessons some. I was playing clarinet in the school band, but I didn't think of it as anything beyond that, frankly, until the Beatles. And I was just at the age, I was like 11. So I had gotten a transistor radio. I was just starting to explore like teenage music, and I'd listen at night, and I was listening for a couple of months, just sort of seeing what was out there, and then all of a sudden the Beatles came on, and it's like, wow. And it just didn't sound like anything else to me. And it's like, wow. And it really was sort of from then on, it was like, wow, I want to do that.
So how long after that epiphany did you join like a rock and roll type band?
A matter of months. I got an electric guitar, an airline guitar from Montgomery Ward's, and it was like this funny model that had the amp built into the case, and I'd only had it 2 or 3 weeks before I joined a band, and. They must have been pretty hard up for personnel because I was just a mere beginner, but I kind of started off playing. They didn't have a bass player, so I sort of played single note low parts on the guitar as maybe what the bass part might have been.
Was that in the Boston area? Were you in Boston?
No, that was in Maryland. I grew up in Maryland, sort of halfway between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. And that's where I grew up until I moved to Boston to go to Berkeley Music School right out of high school. So that would have been the fall of 1970. I graduated high school in 1970, and I've been in the Boston area ever since.
I want to share something with Mark that I didn't know at the time, but you've been to one of my Beatles conventions as a special guest, and I'd like to think we've been friends for a few years now, but we actually met without me ever knowing it in 1980 because you attended the Boston Beatles convention, and it was at the Bradford Hotel. I believe you went with Elliot Easton, and the only reason I knew this was because I was managing this teenage new wave band called the Excerpts at the time. And Dean Falcone, who's still a dear friend of mine, was one of the members of the band. And
Wow.
they saw you there. They got your autograph. They worshiped the cars. And it was like, Charles, you know the cars are here. They're at the convention. And I go, I don't see how. How could they bring cars into the Bradford Hotel? I didn't, there was so much going on. It was just after John had passed and we had the convention. And then it all sunk in. And, I think we shook hands and I think we met, but I'm not sure. But that was such an honor.
I know Dean Falcone.
Yeah, Dean Falcone's a great bass player and great musician. So, it's funny that Kismet brought us all together through the Beatles at a Beatles convention. And, whether we met or not, I'm really not sure. But I was so honored to know that you did attend one of my shows as a fan. I mean, not as a special guest.
Yeah.
I have a Cars story.
When the Cars first started making money, when we were going on that first couple of tours, Elliot and I in particular would go to the record stores to like redo our Beatles collections because mine were all scratched up and stuff from the ones I had from my Meet the Beatles from when I was
sure.
So and we started buying like Japanese import versions when we could, and just tried to upgrade our collection. But also speaking of like kind of small world and a funny like coincidences, when I did move up to Boston, the first concert that I went to was at the Boston Tea Party, and it was the Mothers of Invention with Mark and Howard, and with playing with Frank Zappa, and Jeff Simmons was in the band playing bass. He's the same guy that sang "Lucille Has Missed Mine" on one of the stuff, and Ainsley Dunbar on drums, and I'm pretty sure George Duke on electric piano.
Yeah.
Wow.
That sounds like the lineup then. Yeah. From like 70 to 72, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Never knowing that eventually you would be a turtle.
Yeah. No idea.
Another connection. Well, actually, let me tell my other story since we're talking about meeting. I haven't met any of the Cars before, but in junior high and high school, this is late 70s, early 80s, when you were at your biggest hit phase with the Cars. I was a huge Beatles fan, and my closest friends were huge Cars fans. Now, I didn't dislike the Cars, but they were like, why are you listening to that old stuff? You have to listen to the Cars. There's where it's at. And I had no idea you were such a fan. Had I known that, I'd say, hey, it's like, if there weren't for the Beatles, you wouldn't have the Cars, but now I know
just
that.
Just listen to the guitar riffs and Best Friend's Girl.
Right. Of course, you can say that about any group. If it wasn't for the Beatles, we probably wouldn't have anything in rock and roll
I know.
to the present.
Well, Mark, I'm going to leave most of the questions to you, but I want to throw something to Greg, which I never told him before. Is I think I might have been in college radio when the first album came out, and I remember hearing Just What I Needed on the radio, and the beginning was the beginning of it to me was 3D. It wasn't just radio; it came outside the radio. It was such a great sound. And I'm not sucking up. I'm telling you this because on that listen, I said, my gosh, I always said the Beatles still sound fresh and as great now as they do. And here was another sound that I thought was replacing the Beatles. Believe it or not, I never told you this. And then when Best Friend's Girl came out and other stuff came out, I go, no, wait, I had it all wrong. There's a Beatles influence here. And, and fortunately that was a short time that I thought the Beatles were being not replaced, but that the freshness of the Beatles, I thought was now being surpassed by another sound. And I never shared that with you because for a split second there in time, the Cars were like whew, above everything else to me. Yeah.
It had that lapse there for a little bit.
So I kind of shifting gears, and I'll do that a little bit, but I read this when I do a little research, of course, before I do a show. So I'm not just saying cars, 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 and I don't know what else you've done. But this is what I want to know about, because I'm a huge fan of Martin Mull. You were in Martin Mull and his fabulous furniture in the early 70s?
Yes, I was. It would have been like just previous to the Cars. Not there was. It's funny because I had been in a band with both Rick and Ben that was called Richard and the Rabbits. Let's say that was maybe 1975. So in 1976, I got an offer from this guy, Rich Edelman, who played drums with Martin Mull, to go down, and Martin wanted to augment his band for a show at Central Park at the Woolman Rink, an outdoor concert. So he hired me and another guy who, and I played mainly saxophone, but also clarinet, a little flute, a couple, like I played harmonica on one song and like a little glockenspiel. So, you know, sort of novelty instruments. And, but it turned into like working for him for like a year. And it was the first time I was ever paid a salary for being a musician, which was like a big deal for me. It was like, whoa, this is, but then after that year, Martin was getting a divorce. He disbanded his band, moved to Los Angeles to pursue his acting career, and sort of within a year, he had gotten like a job or a part on the Mary Hartman show. And that even he eventually spun off to his own, what was it, Fernwood Tonight?
Yeah, Fernwood
Johnny
Tonight,
Carson,
yeah.
like Tonight Show type show. And so yeah, but this directly ties in with Mark and Howard.
Yes.
Because with Martin, we did a show for PBS in Chicago called Soundstage. And Martin basically wrote the show. And so the name of the show was 60 Minutes to Kill. And, he wrote these little commercial parodies and stuff. And invited, Flo and Eddie to be the guest artists on the show.
Saw that at the time, but I had no idea you were in the band.
Yeah. So I'm playing like saxophone and I'm in the band. I've got a mustache. So yeah, so that's when I met Mark and Howard. And it's funny, I'm trying to think of, because then, like I said, at the end of the year, Martin let the band go. He moved off. But that's when Rick and Ben got in touch and said, well, we're starting a new band, and it's called The Cars. They already had the name. David was the drummer. Elliot was the guitar player. They just wanted to replace their keyboard player who had been in Captain Swing, which was their band just previous to the Cars, that also had Elliot and Rick and Ben in it. And so then I'm trying to remember, because the Cars played early in Los Angeles. It was either at the Whiskey or the Roxy, one of those two clubs on Sunset Boulevard, I think.
Mhm.
And Mark and Howard both came to the show, and you know, and came back and you know, chatted and stuff, and then it seemed like whenever the Cars would go out and play in LA, they would come see the show. I remember them coming like for the Candio tour when we played the Universal Amphitheater,
Yeah, that's
was called at the
located, yeah.
time. Is it still the Gibson Amphitheater now? I don't
Now
know.
they always put a sponsorship on things. I don't know what the current one is.
But that's what I think of as the Universal Amphitheater.
Right.
And I I remember going out to dinner for Mexican food at La Via Toxco. And they ordered like these big, you know, pictures of peach margaritas.
Yeah.
And a very good time was had by all. And so Mark in particular just sort of made a point of staying in touch. And I'd get a call from him every once in a while, just, you know, hi, how you doing? You know, what are you doing? And if they were like in town, you know, I'd go see them, and you know, vice versa and stuff like that. And then it was like quite a while after the Cars broke up, where I hadn't been. I hadn't been performing for a long time, and it was Mark who called me up and sort of said, you know, what are you doing? And so, you know, hanging around. And he's like, well, our keyboard player's leaving and we need somebody, you know. So it's like, okay. And so then you know, my first show was, you know, I was thinking like, okay, well, you know, what do I have to do, you know, how am I going to, you know, rehearse and stuff? And basically, you know, he just sent me the list of songs and said, well, we'll go over them at sound check. So yikes. So that was sort of a trial by fire for me. Plus it was the first time I had used sort of like rental equipment and didn't have my own synthesizers and stuff on hand. It was, so it's like, you know, yeah, we'll just, you know, we'll rent you a couple of things, and, you know, you're lucky if it's the same you actually requested. But, you know, and then I did it for several years, for quite a while. And they're funny. At that point, they actually sort of had two different bands working. I was sort of like in the East Coast version of the band. And so for economy's sake, when they did the West Coast shows, they had a core group of musicians that they used out there. And, you know, saves on transportation and flights and things like that. So, you know, that one thing about Mark and Howard is they're like practical about stuff like that. And, you know, they know the business because, you know, they've gotten the business, you know, as they explain in that like video where they go through their list of managers.
Oh, yeah.
Have you and how each one had sued them and vice versa. And but I, you know, and the way they've navigated their career, I've always admired. First, just going from the Turtles to the Mothers of Invention is pretty much of a sharp left-hand turn. And then you know, from having their own radio show to being TV writers. And so I you know, I've got a lot of respect for the two of them.
And when you saw them way back when, did you know they were the same guys in the Turtles, or did it just dawn on you later?
Yeah. I knew that from when I first heard what was it? The Fillmore album?
Yeah,
Frank
yeah,
Zappa,
Fillmore 71.
Fillmore,
Yeah,
when he's, which was, I think, the first time they were on. And at the end, they do, you know, their hit with a
yeah,
bullet,
yeah.
which is Happy. So, yeah, but plus they're hard to mistake, you know, when you see them.
Yeah, Mark isn't the typical rock star guy.
I know.
What always fascinated me was the comedy aspect of the show. There's certain people, Jay Black was one of them. If you went to see his show, you knew you were getting a great voice, but you're also going to be entertained. Bette Midler, you know, there's comedy along with the music, and I always love that. Was there anyone else in the East Coast Turtles touring band that we knew? Was it was it a regular ensemble that would be at every show?
Yeah, the drummer was always Joe Stefko, who has played with them for a long time.
Forever, sure.
Forever, years before me. And before them, I think he was in Meatloaf's band.
That's
the
right.
Back Out tour and stuff. And Don Kesselbach on bass was always the bass player too. He played with Rick Derringer, but he's also been with Mark and Howard for years. You know, you know, maybe as long as Joe Stefko. I'm not sure, for a long time anyway. Years before I entered the picture, and.
Did you play any of those? Did you play any of those bottom line shows that they did like for New Year's and Halloween?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was after that period. Okay. Yeah. No, we did a lot of the sort of package shows with other '60s acts, like either with Mark Lindsay, sometimes with Paul Revere, sometimes with Peter Noon, say. And then they also would do like their own shows, you know, at small theaters and you know, like a 90-minute show, and go through the whole history. And you know, and of course they would do comedy bits in between, you know, the hits and things, but you know, we would play a couple of Frank Zappa songs. We played like a little snippet of Peaches and Regalia, and we played Magic Fingers. Open up your pocketbook, get another quarter, and I'll drop it in and meet him opportunity. It's
now, were you a big fan? I guess you did. Yeah, Zappa, 200 motels and everything. So that's where that's from. So yeah,
I was a fan of the Mothers of Invention previously. He was a big influence on me. At that time, probably like second to the Beatles. The whole like orchestrated, you know, for me, the era of like Hot Rats, Burnt Weenie Sandwich, Uncle Meat, Lumpy Gravy, those albums in particular, where, you know, the classical music was combined with little snippets of doo-wop music into like, you know, weird kind of psychedelic sort of jams, and then just sort of bizarre, you know, music concrete, so to speak.
Now, were you a fan of the Turtles back in the day, other than
I
just the hits?
I liked them, and I grew to appreciate them more as time passed on. And then once I really went back and like studied their repertoire, when I knew I was going to be, you know, learning a lot of the songs, then I really like grew to appreciate things that, oh yeah, that was really good and stuff, like the Battle of the Bands album, and you know, the early stuff too. Yeah.
Was any of that stuff difficult to learn? Or
now see, they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot on this show. Monkeys too, and other stuff, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
The three that I go with are the Turtles, the Monkeys, and the Raiders. And I always felt, you know, Raiders and Turtles in that they played all their own material, and you know, they toured with their own, you know, with their own groups, you know, and who knows, maybe someday. There's a big list. There's a big list of
especially Paul Revere and the Monkees. I mean, they were like the first kind of like TV bands too. I mean, you know, obviously the Monkees were put together for the show, but Paul Revere and the Raiders were so like recognizable from the Dick Clark show.
Where the action
Yeah.
Where the action is. Yeah.
Let's see, what was this? What? So when did you join up with the Turtles or Flo and Eddie? You said it was after the Cars first time. So is it like late 80s, early 90s? Is that or later than that?
Yeah, like 2004, 2005.
Okay, because I have an end date. I didn't have a start date. It said that it ended around 2010, and was that your choice, or was that their choice, or did it just kind of?
Yeah, it's
or were the Cars coming back at that point? I'm getting all mixed up.
Well, see, the Cars might have been coming back at that point to do that one that Move Like This record, and because that came out in 2011, we recorded
that makes sense.
2010. So yeah, and also they sort of started getting to the point where they really only did the Happy Together tours during the summer. Yeah. And I was never in the band for any of those Happy Together shows. I just did the shows when they had their own shows. And now one of the reasons why is if you were in the band, the Happy Together tours had a core band that basically backed up all the other acts. You know, if Mark Lindsay came out, you would play his songs. If, you know, whoever else.
Gary Puckett, Buckingham's, whoever it was.
Yeah. Buckingham's might have been a little more self-contained.
Yeah.
But you know, so and yeah, actually I come to think of it, I was never asked to do one of those tours, but I'm not sure I would have done it.
Well, I interviewed Godfrey Townsend. Charles got me him for the show, and he was on the Happy Together tours, and he didn't do the individual Flo and Eddie Turtles concerts like you did. So, I mean, and he said, I'm in the core band, and we're playing for the Mamas and the Papas. Okay, now we're playing for the Turtles. Okay, now we're playing for the Cowcells. You know, it's like they just kept playing throughout the night. You know, every band. You know, so
yeah. I think he was really like the musical director of the band.
Yeah.
But that's one thing with the Turtles you were talking about when I was working with them. I mentioned Joe Stefko, Don Kesselback on bass, and then the guitar players, we had a couple different ones. They would
mix and match.
Yeah. There was a guy, Tristan, a Canadian guy for a while. Excuse me. And then Godfrey did do shows. Okay. He did some fill-ins for some of the other guitar players. And then sort of by the end, he was probably more or less, he probably was the regular guitar player, but that's kind of when they just stopped doing, you know, or pretty much exclusively did the Happy Together tours.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Probably talk more about the Turtles, but of course you're here. And I want to talk to you about the Cars too. So I'm sure you've been asked all these questions a zillion times, but you know, it's like, I'll try to ask different types of questions. I mean, you kind of said how it formed and everything. I guess the question is, you know, that first album was kind of the equivalent of a Meet the Beatles, just the Cars, you know, and like every song's a hit and just was boom on the radio. I remember it very well, you know, and it's like, was that expected or is that just a fluke, you know, in your mind?
It was a total fluke, but it was somebody had the good idea of putting Roy Thomas Baker together with the Cars. And we got to go to London to record our first album at Roy's suggestion, and we rented a townhouse. It was like it was like, for us, our version of Help, where the Beatles all had they all went in separate doors, but then they had this one big common apartment, and we all stayed in this townhouse in London, and recorded it at Air Studios, which was George Martin's studio. And so we were like super excited, got to meet George Martin. He came by, how's things going? But I had no idea. We figured it would be at least like a regional hit, because we'd already sort of had a regional hit with Just What I Needed, with the demo tape version, had gotten a lot of radio play. That and You're All I've Got Tonight was the other song that got a fair amount of play, but mainly Just What I Needed. In fact, we all expected that would be the opening track on the album, because it's got that. It's like, hey, great album opener, but it was like Roy was, good times roll. And then when we were starting to, put things in order, it's like Good Times Roll, then Best Friend's Girl, then Just What I Need. It's like, wow, it's not, what do you mean it's third? It's like, because we thought that was so like the song.
So you guys thought you were just going to be the Stompers, and then all of a sudden you.
Well, yeah, but it took a while. I mean, we started getting a lot of airplay in New York right away, Boston, so the East Coast, and then shortly thereafter in LA, we started getting a lot of airplay, and we probably went out there like to do those like either Roxy or Whiskey, first pretty small club, shows, but little showcase shows. And, but it took about a year really for it to sort of make its way around the country. And it, it was sort of a long time. So I think a lot of people were still starting to pick up on it by the time the second album, Candio, came out.
If memory serves, it was like those two, Cars and Candio, were just like, boom, omnipresent. We're talking like 78, 79, just, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, we probably got everything a little bit after LA. That's typically what happened, unless if you're San Francisco based, it might have been different. But because you come from the East Coast, it's like it goes across the country and then goes down to LA and then it comes up the coast. That's kind of how things go.
I remember when the Cars first played it in San Francisco, and I think it was at the Mabuhay Club or something.
Not sure.
But Neil Young came to see us, and Paul Kantner from Jefferson Airplane.
Yep. They're typically around here. I'm in Oregon now, but
For us, it was a big deal.
Yeah,
sure.
These guys.
Greg, the first time I saw the Cars was at the Yale Bowl. There was about 55,000 people, and I think you opened for the Eagles. Does that make
Beach Boys?
The Beach Boys. And I thought it was a weird combining until I saw the show. But what I remembered about the Cars was you guys were note perfect, and it was like you there was no extra chords. There was no extra guitar leads going on. It was the songs and then the next song. And it was, you know, it's just when you always go to shows and you say, can't they just play it like the album? You did. It was the Beach Boys. Absolutely right. It was the same summer as Eagles, but it was the Beach Boys. And there might have been someone else who opened for you. But I'll tell you, I left after the first Beach Boys song because I felt, wow, I saw the show I wanted to see with the Cars. And no discredit to the Beach Boys because I've seen them 1,000 times before and after. But yeah, that was pretty special.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I
Now,
remember.
At the time when you were the biggest at that starting point, the other big band was the Knack. And they kept saying, the Knack's going to be the new Beatles. But then they really just had one album and the other two kind of sank and everything. But you guys kept going at the Cars. But was there like this competitiveness with groups like that, or you just kind of ignored it?
There was.
Okay.
I mean, I know that it used to irk Rick because it was like the Get the Knack. I forget. They were like #1. And I think Candio might have been #2 album, and we just couldn't, like, you know, they wouldn't give it up. They just stayed in #1 like for that whole time.
Now on that second album, Candio, you got Vargas to do a cover, and wasn't he retired? How did that come about?
I think so. It was David Robinson, our drummer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he was the art guy.
His project. He was the de facto art director for the Cars albums, and he, I guess, also had sort of like a collection of pinup style art, and so somehow tracked down Alberto Vargas to see if he could, get him to, do an illustration for the album cover.
Memorable cover.
Didn't hurt sales, that's for sure.
I'd say most of the Cars albums are really top notch. Robinson did a great job.
Yeah, he did.
Was it difficult to do the typical sophomore slump album, as it were? I mean, was it, or did you have enough left over from the Cars that Candio was easy?
Candio was pretty easy, I thought. We still had some things. I know we had just, like, Night Spots, for instance, which was on Candio. We even started a version of it when we were working on the first album, but it was never finished, and it was just, we had just kind of started it and nothing ever became of it. But somewhere there is like an unfinished version of Night Spots left over from the first album. And what else was on that record?
Let's go in that.
Dangerous Type, and and that's the one with Shooby-Doo and stuff on it.
Shooby-Doo.
Right? double life Shooby-Doo into Candio, and
the title
track. That little. So yeah, that was one of the first, at least for the Cars, more electronic-y, like little funny things. The Shooby-Doo.
Was that? How involved did you get? I mean, I guess you got like all the latest computer equipment to do all those synthesizers and sounds and stuff like that.
I was pretty into the synths at the time, and I was always into like the new drum machine or something coming out, or the new like sequencer or synthesizer or vocoder.
Because that's what I liked on that album was.
I called it a vocoder for years, but it's really a vocoder, like code, not the chord.
That's the part I really like on that album. It's just the "Let's Go" opening is a bow bow bow. I don't know how you do that, but
yeah, it's like one of the synth sounds, and it was one of the Prophet 5. One of the Prophet original preset sounds. More or less. I messed around with it a little bit, but
now a lot of people think the third album is not quite as good. What's your take on it? Was it difficult to do the third album, Panorama? Or
I like the Panorama album. It was more in the direction of like Shooby-Doo and more electronic and more drum machine stuff. It was yeah, I liked it. At the time, I thought, wow, this is really, really good. And this is, I like the whole change in direction. In retrospect, my favorite Cars album is the first one. Yeah. I've reverted back to that. And I agree. There's something just something about it. It's yeah.
Do you have a favorite Cars song?
Maybe Just What I Needed. That one often springs to mind just because it was the first, and there's something unique about it. Yeah, the first time I even heard Rick play me a cassette of it or something like that. Wow, that song could be a hit. It's like, wow, that's what a good song.
Do you have a favorite Turtle song?
I mean, I love Happy Together, but I love Eleanor. Boy, She'd Rather Be With Me. You Baby. You Baby.
Right. Yeah.
You showed me.
Oh, you showed me. Oh, that's great.
Were there any of those songs that you dreaded playing, or any that I can't wait to play? Was there either way?
No, I always liked those. No, none that I dreaded. I can't think of any. Yeah, no, they were fun shows to do. And they were also I mean, like I talked before about how, for rehearsal, Mark said, well, we'll have sound check, so that's the rehearsal. But then even it got so that it's sound check, you go up and make sure all the instruments are working. Then you go into a song and it'll be like, imagine me and you, I think about you. And then Howard will go, okay, we don't want to over rehearse. And then, he'll just do like a couple lines of the song. And then, okay, that's it. You got it? Is like, we're not going to do the whole song, we're and he even talked about how he didn't like being over rehearsed because he liked sort of having a little bit of an edge to the show where it's not, you don't necessarily expect the same thing every night. And if you just said, I don't, and I can appreciate that.
So now not having seen the Cars in clubs, I saw them obviously at Yale Bowl. I saw them, at showcase shows. Was it ever loosey goosey? Because you're describing the Turtles as you never know what's going to happen, and
Right.
under rehearsed. With the Cars, it seemed very rehearsed and very precise. But was that a specific time, or were there other
it was it sort of became that once we started tour. In the clubs, like the year before, or a year and a half before, it was looser because we hadn't quite refined it. It's a little bit like self-editing. And we did have this one song, Take What You Want, which was sort of like our jam song. And that's the one where we would play it sometimes if we just needed the show to go on for a little, or the set to go on for a little longer. And Elliot would play, a 6, 7 minute, 8 minute guitar solo thing. And we used to do that a lot, sort of the first year. But once we started doing, the first year of touring was sort of, we would either be opening for other acts. Like we opened for Foreigner for a little bit. Who else did we open for?
Didn't you open for the Rolling Stones briefly on one tour?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
I thought you did.
never did.
Not everybody.
We opened for the Kinks. Not too many shows with them. Who else? Man, I'm drawing a blank right now. I don't know.
Did the Cars ever do cover stuff? Did you go out and do a few?
Early on we did, yeah. And our strangest one was "Give Me Some Kind of Sign" by, was it
Brentwood?
Give
Brentwood?
me a sign. Give me a sign.
Give me some kind of sign, girl. Yeah.
You don't want me.
Dun, dun, dun,
Yeah. An odd cover.
Yeah.
Actually, we used to, early on, the first year when we played in clubs, we did "Love Is the Drug" by Roxy Music. We did a version, believe it or not, of "Don't Worry Baby" by the Beach Boys.
Wow.
That Rick sang.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. What other covers? We did an Eddie Cochran song that Elliot sang. Something else. Well, here comes that girl again. I don't know the words, but I just remember the. So fine. I can, yeah.
You said Elliot had
study
occasional
it,
guitar.
actually.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd have to relearn it again to actually remember it.
Now you said Elliot got some extended guitar solos at times. Did you get any extended
Yeah.
keyboard solos? Any Inagata Davidas or something like that for you?
No, not really. Moving in Stereo was kind of like the long keyboard song, but it really wasn't. It really, that pretty much stuck to the form that's on the record. We really didn't deviate. The other one that does come to mind is sometimes Elliot might extend the guitar solo in You're All I've Got Tonight. And in fact, that one, we would often close the set with that. So sometimes, like at the end, that was one where we would, like, sort of extend it and let it.
Who's the bigger Beatle? Who's the bigger Beatle fan, you or Elliot?
Oh.
Well,
I'd say we're both equal, but Elliot probably knows still more trivia than I do.
Yeah, but you recorded a Beatles album.
I was going to say, this man had a
Elliot
ukulele album.
Well,
is that still available, Greg? Can people still get that?
I think so. I think you can still get
Beatles uke or ook. I don't know how you pronounce it. Ukulele or ukulele?
Well, I call it uke, but the Hawaiians call it an ook or ukulele. Ukulele. I mean, so they're the more correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's, to me, ook is Hawaiian for uke. It's just, I don't know. It's just the way I sort of learned it. I can appreciate the ukulele.
So what inspired that album besides the Beatles? I mean, why do it that way? Not on keyboards or one of the other instruments you play?
Yeah, it came about because I had done just the single. It was Eleanor Rigby. I was learning ukulele and was heavily interested in it, and I just had the thought of, wow, I should try duplicating, like the string arrangement on Eleanor Rigby, except all played on ukuleles. So that was what I set out to do, and that was sort of. I didn't really envision it beyond that. and I actually played it for Elliot, and he said, "Oh, there's this guy, James Jensen, who's got this like compilation album of, it was like all acoustic, it was all acoustic guitar stuff." But he said, you should send him a copy of it, because it might be, he thought it might fit in with this other thing. and so it was used in that compilation. And then he approached me with the idea of doing a whole, CD of it. And I had been thinking about doing a ukulele like oriented project anyway. And I had just been thinking about maybe the Eleanor Rigby song, maybe, some original things, compositions, maybe some other, more like vaudeville type standard songs that you would expect to hear on a ukulele, like, some of those, I don't know, Pennies from Heaven, or I Can't Give You Anything for Love, or like Tin Pan Alley type songs. And his thing was he just liked the approach of having it be like one thing. So it's like, well, I could do a whole Beatles, collection on the ukulele, or the multi-tracked ukuleles. It's like my version of a ukulele orchestra, because I've got like baritone ukes playing the bass parts, and all the different sized ukuleles playing as close to the original arrangements really as I could match on 4 strings.
So when are we gonna hear the Turtles uke album, or the Monkeys uke album, or the Cars uke album? When's
the Cars uke album? There we go.
Sequel to it.
Just so that we and do it like Tiny Tim.
Yeah, I've done. I do a version of Just What I Needed sometimes. Sometimes I've done like solo uke shows, and I'll do some car songs, and I've sort of went through my history and done a couple turtle songs and played, a little bit of Just What I Needed, or something else on the uke, and yeah, and then a couple of the Beatles tracks, and yeah.
Now, you've actually worked with an actual real live Beatle. You worked with McCartney on Flowers in the Dirt and Motor of Love. What was that like, and what was that about?
I got a call from Chris Hughes, the producer who worked on that track. He got the job of producing that one song on the Flowers in the Dirt album. I knew Chris Hughes he was producer on one of Rick Ocasek's solo records, This Side of Paradise. So I had worked with Chris on that. He knew I was, just from working together and stuff, we talked about the Beatles. He knew I was a big Beatles fan. And so when he got the job to work on this song, he said that when Paul played him the demo of the song, he wanted it to sound a little like Drive by the Cars. So Chris says, well, I know Greg, who, played on that. So, excuse me. So I went over for like 2 weeks to work on the one song. And it was like the thrill of a lifetime, because I'm still that same 11-year-old kid, going to going to, record with Paul McCartney. And I was like, should I even mention the Beatles? Will he not want to talk about it? I don't, because, there was still some acrimony at the time, between various factions and things. But the first day I was in the studio, when he came in, within 10 minutes, he was just like launched into Beatles stories and was like so entertaining. And he came in, he had just gotten copies of the live Russian album. I think it was called back in the USSR,
Yeah.
or so he had an armful of albums that he had just gotten, and the way his name was spelled in that weird Russian alphabet, it looked like Ron McCaptain.
Yeah.
So he goes, "Oh, I just got the new Ron McCaptain LP." And he gives us each one, and so, "Oh, Ron McCaptain." And
I always call that the Choba album, but I think but I know it's not pronounced that way, it's some Russian speakers that's not
right.
it, let's see, what was I going to ask you? Oh, I have a couple more Cars questions, of course. Jumping to the fifth album, I've always wanted to know why Heartbeat City on the original vinyl single promo copy say from the album Heartbreak City. What made the change from Heartbreak to Heartbeat City?
I think it was an error on Elektra's part. I think
I always wanted to know that.
Yeah, as far as I know, it was always Heartbeat City.
Okay.
And if, like you said, it was on the first copy, it's like,
yeah, it was on the promo copy, but not on
it's like, that's wrong. At least they caught it by the record.
Another thing is the song Hello Again is pretty straightforward on the album, but then you went nuts with Bugs Bunny clips and things like that on the extended version. Did you have anything to do with that?
I went down basically to observe it. I didn't have too much input. It was Arthur, what's his name, who was like the remix guy. Arthur Baker, right?
Oh, that might be right.
Yeah, I think so. But then the two sort of engineers he had who were really working the board were the Lord Alge brothers, who both have become producers in their own right. Chris Lord Alge and boy, what's his brother's name? Well, I can't remember. Anyway, they were.
Well, you were using Mutt Lange as a producer on that album, so
Yeah. Now that's a whole nother somewhat complicated story in itself. It was initially Rick's idea to get Mutt to do it, and Rick's reasoning was that he liked the drums and guitar sounds from what's their name? Not Def Leppard, the other band. The guitar from Australia. Again, I'm blanking out.
AC/DC?
AC/DC or no?
AC/DC, exactly.
Okay. I'm looking it up. I'm helping you out.
But Mutt, having since then had discovered the Fairlight music computer system that he used extensively on the Def Leppard records. That's easy for me to say. The Def Leppard records.
Fred Zeppelin.
The Pyromania and the one before, which is what he did, yeah, just previous to the Heartbeat City album. So on Heartbeat City, the drums are all programmed and like sampled as they are on those Def Leppard records as well. And Rick kept trying to get, can't you set up the drums and like, mic them, and so then, Mutt tried it and basically spent a week sort of moving mics around with David, going out and banging. And then Mutt was like, I can't get a sound on these drums. And then just went back to the Fairlight. and now working with Mutt, it became a lot longer of a project than we had expected it to. We didn't really know how long it was going to be. I think I went over in the spring with like a spring jacket to start working on the record, and we didn't like come home until like Christmas.
I mean, it turned out well, but was that like your White Album, like a big Friction album?
Yeah, it was. I mean, at the time, I was fascinated because I was like still into the sequencers, drum machines, the technology of it, and the fact that it was so precise. I was really drawn into that, and I still appreciate it. That whole like Kraftwerk style where everything is always in sync. It's right on the beat. No. You don't go off the beat. It's like right there. It's like smack on the beat. The bass is always perfectly in sync with the bass drum and this. And Mutt spent a lot of time, moving things around in milliseconds. Like that part sounds slightly early to me. And he would like move it around and like shift it back 2 milliseconds. And then especially like when we were doing backing vocals, he really would like spend so much time moving those around. And we would like sing all the backing vocals, say on one chorus, and then he would like you fly him into the other choruses. So you only have to sing it once. You don't have to re-sing it on the second and third chorus. You'll sing it on the first chorus, and then he'll copy it and fly it, like get have all the backing vocals on one tape machine, the other tape machine with the music here, and you have to sync them up. And then he spent so much time on, oh, that one's late, that one's early, that one's late. Just days and days, it was like, I used to joke there was no detail so small that Mutt wouldn't happily spend days working on it. And he was just like and it drove Rick crazy for one thing, finally, after not getting, like, especially I think like the live drums he was kind of hoping for in the first place, and then the whole like taken a long time to finish the record. It's really got on Rick's nerves. There was so much time in between, sometimes other band members would just go on side trips. Like Ben would go to Paris for a few days because, he wasn't singing or something, or playing bass. So, I'm just going to go somewhere for a few days and then I'll be back. And, one thing that I do say to Mutt's credit is I felt like he really like made me raise my level of expectations. Like I thought I was pretty I thought I was, fairly, precise, playing something. But I remember that, like, the first time I started playing a keyboard part with him, he goes, not quite. And then, a little early, that one's a little late, and then, it really made me focus on preciseness, for better or for worse. Some people in the band took to it worse than others. I probably took to it that approach the most. Although I've come to appreciate, like I said, it's still to this, I've reverted back to the first album being my favorite Cars album, and that was the most organic one. So
my personal is I like the first and the fifth, the one we're talking about. But I understood even at the time it was a difficult album. Is what happened on Heartbeat City what inevitably led to the breakup after Door to Door at that time? The next one?
Well, Door to Door was like an unfocused follow-up. We didn't have an outside producer on it. For me, it was just an unpleasant experience. Rick and Ben really weren't getting along at the time. It was the least of our efforts.
Now, when you got together many years later in 2011, I mean, was that a happier experience at that point?
It was a happier experience, but it was also for me, ultimately an unsatisfying experience, I would say. Well, first of all, it was bittersweet not having been there.
Right.
Yeah. So without Ben. So that was already one piece of the Cars that was missing. And then after doing the record, we did really only a handful of shows. I think we did 14 shows. So we basically quit once we had just started up again.
Yeah.
And that was from Rick's end. He just didn't want to do any more shows.
Of course, now Rick's gone too. I mean, the inevitable question is, you and Elliot are still around, and Dave and Todd Rundgren's still around. Is there a chance for a new Cars reunion?
I think it's.
That's never going to happen. Okay, I just had to ask. I was always curious about that little venture into the new Cars.
That's a whole nother funny story, but not that I want to go into it particularly.
No,
but
we don't.
One thing but after that, I ended up working off and on with Todd for like 15 years. So no
hard feelings.
It was, and Todd was always one of my heroes musically. He was, so that was
a plus.
Yeah. I mean, it's I feel like I have been so lucky that I've gotten to work with a lot of my heroes. Todd, Paul McCartney, I could stop there and be happy.
And Howard and Mark.
And Howard and Mark, of course. No, I love Howard.
I did want to ask this earlier, so, and I was going to bring it back anyway to wrap it up with the Turtles here. And I appreciate you going through the Cars history, however briefly we're doing it. With Mark and Howard, I know Charles and I interviewed Andy Kahn, who played keyboards in the West Coast version.
Right.
And he was saying, that he had to have big repertoire in his mind, so when they'd say, hey, let's talk about the Monkees, and suddenly they go into Daydream Believer or something, or they'd say, mention Bruce Springsteen, and suddenly they're going into Hungry Heart or something. Did you have that ability to just change with the flow when they had that in the shows?
not to that degree.
That's fine.
No, we did no.
So it's more straightforward on your shows. You just played the hits,
Yeah.
and maybe they had some spoken comedy and stuff between things.
Yeah, yeah, they did. And yeah, I'm trying to think of exactly what song. Now I'm blanking out again.
Well, I know you said they did Peaches and Regalia, so you. Yeah, and then probably maybe some other Zappa ones. I know back in the day they would do parodies of like Jumpin' Jack Flash and My Sweet Lord, and
yeah, and well, sometimes
Bang a
we
Gong,
would
Get
do-
It On.
Oh, the one that we would do sometimes was Nicky Hoy, the Hawaiian. You think we're diving for gold? We know we're diving for pearls. You think we're diving for pearls? We know we're diving for love. But during the course of that song, they go into like a whole shtick talk, and they would parody like little bits of like Joni Mitchell, and Bruce Springsteen. Right. They would go into like it was Bruce Springsteen song, with the.
Well, I know they did actually. Flo and Eddie did sing backups on "Hungry Heart," the song, and "Bang a Gong, Get It On" with T-Rex and stuff like that. So they had their own repertoire, but I've heard that they did that way back, even before Zappa days, that they would just kind of segue into something else arbitrarily, and it was, even in the '60s version of the Turtles, they'd do that.
Yeah, and another cross pollination of my influences is they did the backing vocals on the Psychedelic Furs album that has "Love My Way" on it. Which Todd produced.
No backing vocals on any Cars albums.
You didn't do any recording with Flo and Eddie? There's no release stuff that you're on?
No.
It was all live stuff then. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And just have to ask this: did you ever work with? I know this isn't Flo and Eddie, but did you ever work with Ringo over the years? I don't know of any instance.
No.
Not even a tour with him. He has his all-star band, or you weren't an all-star.
Todd introduced me to Ringo. However,
at least you met him.
At the Ringo show, because Todd was playing in his band, and so at one of the Boston shows, he was like, want to come to the Ringo show? Yeah, I already had tickets, before Todd asked me if I wanted to, and I said, I've already got tickets, but how.
You would be a great Ringo all-star band member.
Yeah.
Ringo, call him up. Call this man up.
Yeah, I know.
He can do Cars hits on stage with you.
I think I didn't sing the hits though. That's my
yeah.
That's what's going against me in that regard.
Did you see the Beatles in concert back in the day?
Yes, 1964, September 13th at the Baltimore Civic Center. Yeah.
And outside of that, did you meet George or John at any point?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I read John mention the Cars in one of his last interviews, where he's talking about the song "Starting Over" that had just come out on his last record, and he was describing it as like a 50s song with like a modern slant to it. And then he mentioned Hungry Heart by Springsteen and Touch and Go by the Cars.
Yeah, that was on Panorama.
That were like 50s, but he said they're 50s songs, but with like a modern, like production edge or something.
He was actually spot on at that time, because there was a 50s influence. Like Queen had what's that song, big hit at that time, and then you had Shake It Up in 81. It's very 50s influence and stuff like that. So it was around, but it was with of course with more modern 70s, early 80s techniques and stuff like that. So so I'm out of questions. I don't know, Charles, do you have any questions?
Did you see Get Back? Did you see the Beatles?
I have yet to see it. Surprisingly, but because I don't have Disney Plus. And I know a lot of people who are just signing up, to watch it, and then they say, I'll just quit after a month. But I'll see it. I'll see it soon.
Cool.
Oh, the Queen song I'm thinking of is Crazy Little Thing Called Love.
That's
a very 50s.
Rockabilly, 50s sounding.
And that all came out around the same time,
that's
and then of course, Lennon also cited B-52s, and they kind of had that 50s influence with the Rock Lobster and stuff, even though he was saying it more for Yoko and stuff, but still.
Right. That's right. I know.
But anyway,
I made that connection a couple of times with the B-52 and Yoko.
So wrapping up here, what are you currently doing? Are you recording any albums, going on tour, writing books, watching TV shows? What are you doing?
Well, I don't know. I'm sort of like sorting through what I do have and kind of sorting through some like Cars backlog of either alternate takes of things or outtakes or live performances. There was never a live Cars album, for instance.
So we might have a Cars anthology or some future release.
It's within the realm of possibilities.
Cool. That would be amazing. That would be great.
In recent times you put out the original albums with extra tracks, so I really appreciated that. That was great.
Oh yeah.
Who makes that call? Who decides?
Well, that's a good question, because it's a little I mean, because like you say, it's sort of David and Elliot and myself. But there's Rick's estate, there's Ben's estate, so we're still partners, and so I'm not sure. Well, but once I'm sure.
If it's meant to be, right? If it's meant to be, we'll see.
Yeah.
If I think if you have any push, we'll eventually see it. I think I know you carry the torch for the band so well, and you've been a spokesperson for the Cars and for it's you're a star, but you're a fan at the same time, and that makes you very special to us.
Well, thanks. I mean, I was, I just sort of say I was a lucky guy.
Very talented, lucky guy, a very great musician.
The world is better for your work.
I want to thank you for all the times you've been, so generous to me with, contributing to my book and coming to conventions. And we had a few memorial videos that you contributed to when we lost Peter Tork and all that. So thank you for being there for me, and thank you for being on the show. And I'll let Mark close, but that was my personal thank you, Greg.
Well, thanks, Charles. Thanks. Yeah, and my apologies if I'm not quick to answer my emails sometimes.
It's all good.
We got you here now.
It's It's my ADD. I just like, what?
All yours,
right.
Mark.
On that note, we'll wrap it up. And I appreciate both Greg Hawks and Charles Rosenay for being here with me today on the Fun Ideas podcast.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right.